Yo, listen up, here's the story about a little guy that lives in a blue world. And
welcome to episode 7. That's 7, not 6, as Matt said before they started recording, of Ben and Matt's Marvellous journey. This is an in-depth walk down memory lane with the MCU. We're doing one film that Marvel have made every week until we hit Avengers Infinity War, for which we are very excited. My name is Matt Waters. I'm the Matt half, the second half, and yet I talk first. I'm joined by Ben Phillips, who's alphabetically first, even though he's sort of, not the lifelong real-world person I am. Ben, how are you?
I'm good. You missed my middle name.
I did.
You did. It is Ben. Iron Man 3 is a great movie. Shut the fuck up, Phillips.
Okay, that's weird. I have the same middle name. Weird. Oh, small world. Yeah, so it's Iron Man 3. Easily one of the most divisive films that Marvel have made. Well, I don't know, actually. I feel me and you might be the only people that really, really like it. Everyone
No, I tweeted last night in the middle of my watch, Iron Man 3 is a great movie, don't at me. I'm currently, I think every single person who's responded to it has said it's great, yes, and no one has disagreed yet. So from that, 100% of people love Iron Man 3.
Yeah, I think it was a big thing at the time that everyone hated it, and then it's just maintained a reputation. But if you just sit down and watch it, I think most people like it, but who knows. So it's Iron Man 3. This is the beginning of Phase 2 of Marvel. Like, what a phase was didn't really make a whole lot of sense at the time, but we've now seen this is their plan going forward. We're heading towards the end of Phase 3, and then we will start Phase 4, hopefully with the Fantastic Four, because that's just, come on now, it's a layup. And fun fact about Phase 2, every film in Phase 2 somebody loses their arm. That's a little nod to Star Wars for no real reason. But starting with Iron Man 3, released 3rd of May 2013. The films that have come out since the Avengers are Amazing Spider-Man and The Dark Knight Rises. So kind of a, Avengers, obviously incredible, you heard the episode. I think I liked Amazing Spider-Man 1 more than some people did at the time. And then Dark Knight Rises, you can hear my thoughts on that on IntoTheRealWorld.com. The Tape Crusaders, Mike Thomas and I did a podcast about every Batman film there is, and by the time you hear this, there might be another one, because Gotham by Gaslight is out, and we're planning to do that, so hey-ho. It's released on the same year as the 50th anniversary of Iron Man, so that's nice. And just overall, before we get into, minutiae of it, this is clearly the best Iron Man film.
Yes, oh my god.
If you are the people that just cling on to Iron Man 1 is the best, because it turns out I like Robert Downey Jr., you're kind of a moron.
This and Avengers are the first movies that actually feel like they were made by filmmakers who had a vision. Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 are very much kind of like, you get Jon Favreau in there, and he's very, he's not putting his own stamp on it. It's very much just let's let Robert Downey Jr. do his own thing. Thor, you kind of see, you get it to be kind of Shakespeare. Captain America, you hire Joe Johnston to do what he did in The Rocketeer. And then you get to Avengers and Iron Man 3, and there's actual personality from a filmmaker.
Well, I mean, the reason for that is this is directed by and co-written by Shane Black, who has one of the more easily identifiable styles in Hollywood.
Even though Iron Man 3 kind of flies in the face of what his style, quote-unquote, is.
A bit. It's still quite subversive, and it's got narration, it's set at Christmas time, it's got someone who's a bit bumbling, but everything works out well for them eventually anyway. I think it's quite Shane Blacky.
But it's Shane Blacky, but it's not. I mean, Lethal Weapon, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys are all movies that have a very similar conceit in that they are two male leads who are kind of at odds and kind of banter off each other and stuff like that. And Iron Man 3 doesn't really have that.
There's a quick section of it with Don Cheadle near the end.
There is, and you can also...
You kind of almost wish that they were doing it earlier.
But you can also kind of argue that the same thing happens with... Ty Simpkins also gets that kind of, relationship with Bob Downey Jr. Yeah. But, the fact that they keep on trading in and out people to kind of have this relationship with Downey Jr. kind of... It's not quite as...
It's also been turned into more of a detective story, and Shane Black obviously likes those. I'm just saying.
It's Shane Blacky, but I don't think you wouldn't do Lethal Weapon, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Nice Guys, and Iron Man 3 as a cohesive
I will say watching it made me want to watch Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys again, even though I watched both of those within the last month because of this podcast, and also just watching Nice Guys, which took me way too long and is a very good film. This film is great. We've complained twice now about Tony not going on enough of a journey. He got slightly more to do in Iron Man 2 in terms of character development. This one, though, great big fat dollop of character development playing off of the Avengers, and it's good. It's great. Let's start talking about it. So they spent $200 million making this movie, which is the same as Iron Man 2, but it brought in $1.21 billion, making it still to this day the third highest grossing Marvel film, significantly more than anything in Phase 1 except for the Avengers. So they are clearly riding this crest of popularity from the Avengers, where those early Marvel films, I feel they had their audience. They broke through, some of them broke through to mainstream a little bit more than maybe they had dared dream. But since the Avengers, Marvel becomes an event. Like any film they put out, everyone is incredibly excited for and goes to see day one. And we see the evidence of that here. And obviously, you know, Robert Downey Jr., the most popular sort of lead they have so far. So it all makes sense. As I said, written and directed by Shane Black. Drew Pearce also was a writer on this. He started working on a Runaways script several years ago, not the one that is currently on, but he also did some work on Pacific Rim and Godzilla, I believe. 130 minutes long, so it's the longest solo film we've discussed so far. The first cut was 3 hours and 15 minutes.
I'd love to see that cut.
Shane Black,
I know I wouldn't, but I would love to see it.
Well, we'll be talking about that as we go, because there are several quite profound changes that were made. But Shane Black wanted to do more stuff along the lines of Demon in the Bottle, and that is some of the stuff that got cut. So it's the last film that Paramount got their little share in. Disney will be flying solo going forward, I believe. Jon Favreau opted not to direct this film. He chose to do Magic Kingdom, but he remains on as executive producer, and he gets to do, I guess, even more acting, although he's missing from most of it.
Yeah, this is the movie with the most Favreau, despite the fact he's not on set the entire time. Also, you say he got to do Magic Kingdom. He didn't get to do Magic Kingdom.
I know, but he wanted to. Anyway, Robert Downey Jr. then went for Shane Black, who he, worked with on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, had been pitching him dialogue in Iron Man 1 and 2, giving him some story beats in Iron Man 2, and he has famously said that Shane Black was kind of the only person he could imagine getting for this, and it's still feeling like an authentic vision of what the creative team for the first two Iron Man films had been doing, because he'd been sort of involved from the beginning. So he's here in full force, and he kind of warps Iron Man around what he likes to do. And we get this film. So Ben, this is quite difficult for you because you've kind of done it twice already, so we don't need to know the entire history of Iron Man. It's just, has there been a significant reaction from comic books based on Iron Man 1 and 2 and the Avengers? I guess it's quite a short window between Avengers and Iron Man 3.
At this point, we've kind of seen Matt Fraction's already come on and kind of like redesigned Iron Man and made him kind of into the front page news, but really the only significant thing that's happened since then was Marvel Now happened. Kieran Gillen is now the lead writer on Iron Man, and that's about it. Iron Man's just kind of trucking along. There's nothing interesting going on in his life. Okay. We can get into the stuff like he's not actually the daughter of Howard Stark, or the son of Howard Stark, and
he's got an adopted, to all of that.
Yeah, that's the kind of only significant revelation that's kind of happened in between Avengers and now.
Well, instead of that, do you want to maybe gloss over Extremis and Demon in a Bottle, because those are the two things that this story are heavily based on?
Yes, so Extremis has already been quite important in the kind of overall look of Iron Man. It's 6 issues by Warren Ellis and Eddie Grainov, published in the mid-2000s, which the redesigned suit of Iron Man they used in that is very much what they used the basis of in the first and second Avengers movie. Basically, it's about kind of little robots that allow Iron Man to kind of have the suit on at all times.
When you say little, I mean, that's not really conveying it well enough. I'm imagining things that are like knee-high. We're talking nanobots, right?
We're talking nanobots, yeah. And then obviously the Extremis is quite important to this movie. It's not at all the Extremis from the comics, but it's still very much like you could call this Iron Man Extremis and get more or less across like what they're trying to do in this one. But that is Extremis is the touchstone for a lot of this stuff that's kind of been sprinkled throughout but not wholly adapted. But the work that Warren Ellis and Eddie Grainov did in Iron Man is felt the most palpably across this entire series. And then Demon in the Bottle is probably the most famous Iron Man run of all time, which is basically Tony Stark has an alcohol problem, which continues to be an on and off problem for the character. I seem to recall the ultimate version of Tony Stark actually gets smarter the more he drinks, which obviously when you get like people like Mark Miller writing it, it kind of makes it a bit problematic, but still it's like Iron Man and addiction things are very much kind of like hand in hand.
He's an obsessive personality.
Exactly,
I feel to become this level of genius you have to be. So
yes, it's obviously a very good character beat to kind of play, and you get to see it in this movie the most clearly, even though there is not really any alcohol stuff, but you do get to see
the kind of the
addictive
hallucinations that are haunted by his own armor, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so, as I said, this story is loosely based on Extremis with some elements of Demon in a Bottle thrown in. I'm not going to spend 5 minutes telling you the plot. It's primarily a story about Tony being stranded in the middle of nowhere without his armour, trying to cope with possible PTSD after the events of the Avengers, and he's working to unravel the mystery behind this Extremis stuff, this project, this secret thing that's causing people to die a lot in huge explosions. He's also battling the international terrorist, the Mandarin, and Aldrich Killian, who is the leader of Advanced Idea Mechanics, aka AIM, who are a huge part of Marvel Comics throughout history. So, yeah, the way we're going to structure this episode is going to be very different to anything else. And the way that this came to me was I just wanted to I thought to myself, there are so many common criticisms that are levelled at this, and I feel I can deflect every single one of them and say, actually, no, it's this. So what I did was I sought out a kind of listicle-esque article which captured as many of those criticisms as possible, and I came across something from a certain popular web platform. Probably not going to mention it because that feels a bit shitty, but it has captured 10 of these common criticisms, and we're basically going to go through this list from 1 to 10 and use that to talk about the film, because you can kind of slot the entire plot of the film in amongst these 10, and anything left we will mop up at the end. It's going to kind of break how we would do it in terms of the ordering, but only a little bit, because the first criticism is Pepper's story. I don't know why that is the first one that came to mind, but it is, so we're going to start there. The criticism is that she kind of flip-flops between a damsel in distress and a character who at one point wears the Iron Man suit as a little nod to Rescue, which is her brief alter ego in the comics. And at the end, she ends up having Extremis in her, so she has superpowers, and like she kills the bad guy at the end, and then it's all just magically repaired. Of the criticisms of this movie, this is one of the ones I can see a bit more easily than the others. There are some more famous ones that you and I have very strong feelings about. I think if you're saying it's bad that she wears the suit or anything like that, I think you're a bit of an idiot.
That's actually one of my favourite moments.
Yes.
It's like you see Tony start to do the hand movements to put the suit on, yes, and then you realise that he's putting on her to
yes,
defend
because
her.
This film opens with him. He invents this sort of the armour that is in parts and slots, and it flies onto his body in pieces and assembles because he's injected himself with some stuff, which is sort of
nanobots.
Yeah, kind of. And he makes these gestures, and suddenly all the pieces fly onto him. So yes, he, as you said, he gestures to put it on himself while his house is being blown up by terrorists. But Pepper is between he and the pieces, and instead they all fly onto her by accident.
Is it accident? I thought it was like a purposeful move by him to like.
Oh, I thought he was trying to put it on himself, and she.
No, I think he's actually trying to protect her, and he's selflessly putting the armor on her.
That makes sense too. Yeah, so I mean, as part of all this, Gwyneth Paltrow is back as Pepper Potts. Robert Downey Jr. pushed for her to have more action scenes, and she certainly gets those. Good for him. He made sure she was in Avengers. He's made sure she gets stuff to do here. I mean, it would have been nice if he asked her to be paid more, but this is as close as we can get, I suppose.
She suffers in that, like, much like a couple of characters' movie. There's a big swathe in the middle where she kind of gets sidelined. Yes. And it's kind of unavoidable when you decide to do the Tony Stark on his own in the wilderness storyline that you're not going to spend much time with the people who he's kind of using as his support crutch. We can argue whether or not it's problematic where she ends up in that middle section of the movie.
Yes.
But I think in Act 1 and Act 3, she's very capable and is really good. It's just in that Act 2, it's just kind of going like, is this really the best use of Gwyneth Paltrow? Or is this any use of Gwyneth Paltrow whatsoever?
I mean, I feel she's not a damsel here. She gets to wear the armour in the middle, and then at the end she is the one that saves the day. If you think that's goofy, that like, oh, the girl gets to do all this, you know, one, you have some things you need to look inside yourself and address, but two, I'd rather this than like she's just like, oh no, help me, which is kind of what happens in the middle, but you don't see much of it.
Yeah, like you could have this end up being, oh look, Tony and Pepper are together now, let's have them have like relationship problems and blah 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 blah, and I'm just like, I'm not interested in that. Like, I like the idea of these two being an actual functioning couple that is good for each other.
Okay, you say that. Another common criticism is that they out of nowhere do have these relationship problems, and I would say it's not out of nowhere if you consider the plot point we'll be talking about after this, where a suit of armour comes into their bedroom in the middle of the night and like grabs her, and he has to disable it, and then he has a panic attack, and it's like, you know, I can see how that might freak her out quite a lot. See, it's a scary little scene.
But like, they're not like those kind of standard, like they're not like TV show relationship problems where you finally get the couple together and then, oh look, the hot ex-boyfriend has shown up, and
exactly.
Like, well, the hot ex-boyfriend does show up, but
yes.
Like she's only interested in the fact that like he's gotten hotter, but she's not actually seriously contemplating, oh, am I going to break up with Tony and end up shacking up with this guy? She's dealing with someone with mental health problems to jump onto another point about this movie.
Yeah, well, that's number two. So
that's number two. Okay, but like, yeah, she's dealing with some of the mental health issues, and I think having her be functioning in the light of this would have been a disservice to the difficulties it can be to be a partner with mental health issues.
100%. I think her delivery at the end of that was really violent after she like kills Killian, I think is amazing. A part of this criticism that I found genuinely hilarious was that now that we've seen she can wear the suit, why isn't she like a full member of Team Iron Man? It's like, I mean, she can have the suit on and perform a simple task, but that doesn't mean A, she would want to, B, Tony would want her to, or C, that she'd be capable of being Iron Man. Or I also, at the same time, don't think that's him like robbing her of agency. I just think that
she's not shown any proclivity towards being a superhero.
No,
so
she doesn't want to do that. Like, you know, if someone like comes at her, she can defend, but she doesn't want to go out there and be.
Gwyneth Paltrow continues to be really good in these movies, and I like that in that final takedown scene, she gets to take down like what is the closest approximation to the kind of old Tony armor in this. Like, the one that like flies across to kind of take her down is very much like in the model of the armor scene in Iron Man.
Okay, so the second point, the kind of meat of this whole thing for me, the panic attacks. This person in this article criticising the film says that they are acted really badly and it's not a convincing representation of PTSD. Now, I get to actually say this. Actually. Psychology Today says the opposite. I read a whole article that analysed this film in Psychology Today, and it said it was actually pretty accurately done. So Robert Downey Jr. is back as Tony Stark. I think he plays all of this stuff very, very well, and it is one of the high points of the whole MCU for me, is this genuine consequence that comes from a previous film, because we are keeping track as we go, and it wasn't as relevant in the sort of first five. As we go forward, there is this criticism that Marvel like to introduce things and then immediately drop. This is the exact opposite of that, where they took something that, you know, Tony does almost die in the Avengers, but he doesn't seem like that has bothered him beyond the initial moment. But instead we see here, you know, in the opening scene, he hasn't slept in 3 days and he has built 42 models of armour by now. And, you know, we've seen him build, like, I don't know, 6 of them before now.
This number 7 armour is the one that he gets into at the end of Avengers. Okay, so he's built 35 armors in between the space of Avengers and this movie.
And and it's not even that long after the Avengers. So I really like that this is a man that has conquered sort of the world of logic. Like, his brain is able to overcome any problem. He built a suit that allows him to overcome any physical shortcomings he might have. He is then thrown into an alien invasion alongside gods, and he accepts briefly that he's going to die in space alone. That's quite a harrowing thing. And you can see how this man that, you know, previously felt untouchable, and it's something they played on slightly in Iron Man 2, the consequence of saying, I am Iron Man, and then people come for him. This takes it to another level where he's vulnerable, and his only way of dealing with it is to throw himself into inventing things, and he sees this suit as a way to protect himself, so he just builds endless suit revisions. and is just losing himself in that. And I think all of that is just so well done. And, he remains quippy and charming, but they give it that extra level of drama. And, like, finally, I'm like, oh, I care about Tony Stark as a human being. I did in Avengers as well. I did good stuff with him there, with Cap criticising his character. But I think this is all just a very natural building point, and we'll continue to get good stuff with Stark going forward.
Yeah, I can only imagine that, like, the criticism is that, like, the 2 or 3 scenes where he has actual panic attacks are kind of like, they kind of come out of nowhere. But
I think that's accurate.
No, it is. 100% it is accurate. But I think for some people who, like, especially, like, even 5 years ago when this movie came out, mental health wasn't at the forefront of a lot of people's kind of consideration for these kind of things.
Yeah.
And so even though the entire character basis is kind of dipped in this kind of stuff, like, I love the stuff like it's date night and he can't even bring himself to go upstairs to have a date night with his girlfriend.
Yeah, he's remotely controlling the armor to talk to her while he's in the basement working out. He's not even doing anything.
Yeah, like they don't make a big deal of it, but it's that kind of thing where it's just like, I want to be in my safe space, and being out there in the open is kind of like probably a bit more stressful than he'd like to let on, and like they just kind of leave it unremarked. And obviously, like, he's got explicit panic attacks throughout the movie that are all very good.
My favourite is that first one, when him and Rhodey are in a bar and the kids approach them and they ask him to sign a drawing, and he writes "help me" on it at first before you even realise what's happening, and then he thinks the kid is saying, like, how did you get out of there or whatever, and he runs to the suit and gets in it and is asking Jarvis to diagnose him and everything. I just think that one in particular is very, very well played. Yeah,
this is his safe space. He feels safe in a suit, which he doesn't feel elsewhere, and they don't really remark on it throughout the movie, and I just think it's a really lovely. He gets them more often when he's out of the suit, and he feels naked and afraid when he's out of the suit for most of Act 2, and it's just really well done, and it's not subtle in the way that movies are, but like it's subtle for a superhero movie that's as big and bold as this one is, and I really appreciate that it does that.
For sure. Shane Black talked about how if you're going to do a third film, you have to do things the first 2 don't do, and I think this definitely qualifies as that, where we've seen this evolution from this selfish guy who is confronted with his selfishness, and he builds the armor and he starts to make some changes, and he gets to a point where Pepper sees him in a new light and stuff, and you see him, I don't know, just over time he's evolving, he's becoming less selfish, and he's developing, starting from the second one, this sense of legacy. And I think part of why this affects him so much is his fear of his own mortality, that he feels he's conquering through all these machines and everything, and like he's desperately trying to have this legacy. He's an unmarried man with no children, and even from the first film, he's older, I think, than typically these superhero characters tend to be. It's not that him and Pepper aren't going to have kids one day. It's just, it seems like, he's at a certain age and he's very aware that until now he's been very alone. And his legacy is this warmonger, essentially. So I think all of that plays into everything Tony does going forward, including this, and I think it contributes heavily to his fear.
Are we assuming that Tony Stark is a similar age to Downey Jr., in which case he was 42? He was 42 when these films started. So,
because even if he was a child genius, it would take time to build $1 billion company. I suppose Howard was wealthy as well, but I feel the level of fame and success he is at suggests he is late 30s at the youngest in the first one. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, another criticism: where are the Avengers? AKA Tony going solo. Now, this is somewhat of a problem for every solo movie after these people have met, and it's the problem with, we talked about it in the Netflix shows, like, why wouldn't Iron Fist show up and help Luke Cage, etc. So
that's a very obvious one.
Yeah, okay, fine. On some level, that criticism makes a bit of sense. However, we can't just not have any solo movies, for one thing, and also he's literally stranded without communication for a little bit, and also Stark is a egotistical guy. He doesn't particularly feel he needs help, and we saw that Nick Fury and Black Widow decided he wasn't really necessary for what they were doing initially. So I can see why there would be not like regular it's not like Tony and Nick Fury are giving each other little briefings back and forth. I feel he is called in for the big stuff. And while parts of this film are a huge threat, like, once the president gets taken, I can see how maybe someone might step in. But for a lot of this, it's like there's nothing really happening that requires you to summon a god from Asgard, the Hulk, like all this sort of stuff. So I I don't know about that. And also, you know, narratively speaking, I think it's very interesting to take this man, strand him somewhere without his suits, which is the biggest thing, and then his entire support system. Like, Jarvis is offline to him for a while, and it's like, you know, let's find out who this guy actually is.
Yeah, I think the only way this criticism kind of like doesn't then break every movie going forward, because it would break every movie going forward if you watch a solo movie and go like, oh well, Captain America would show up at this point, oh he would get help from this one, is if you think that like this story gets too big for them not to call in other people. Maybe someone would get called in when Tony's house gets blown up, but like you'd like to like maybe if they throw in a line that's basically just like, oh, Captain America's off also dealing with the Mandarin thing, like he's in the Middle East kind of like doing his own investigation into it and stuff like that, that doesn't really cross over with like what's going on because he's being used by S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever to do that kind of thing. And like that would feel possibly more ingrained in the universe and stuff like that, but like at the end of the day it doesn't matter.
No.
Like,
had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started yet? Did it like premiere this summer or something?
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would start in September, so about a few months after this. So
you wonder if that had been rolling, because they always react to whatever the film. I think always, most of them, I think they react in some small way to whatever film is coming out. I wonder if there would have been an episode where it's like we have to go to Stark's house or something, or maybe they're. You know, for all we know, they're investigating Extremis somewhere else, like from a different angle. But Tony isn't one to consult, and he isn't one to sort of wait. So
yeah, like there is no way for Tony to call in other people. It's just whether or not other people are monitoring the situation, and whether or not they feel that Tony's part of this situation needs to be monitored as heavily as suicide bombings going in the Middle East that maybe require more humanitarian aid and actual on the ground work from people. We get Iron Patriot kind of like flying in and dealing with some stuff in the Middle East and stuff like that. But who's to say that Black Widow and Captain America aren't actually doing legwork? Because we know they're employed by S.H.I.E.L.D. at this point, and we know that they're doing actual missions, like stealthy missions and stuff like that when you get to Winter Soldier. So there's nothing to say that they're not doing it. It's just to say that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Iron Patriot. So for a while, Tony is solo, but his sidekick to an extent in this movie and most Iron Man movies is James Rhodes, Don Cheadle in his second appearance. War Machine has changed his name to Iron Patriot. Obviously, Iron Patriot is a worse name than War Machine. It's a nod to, you know, Norman Osborn was the Iron Patriot, I believe.
Was
for a while, yeah. Led the
otherwise known as Green Goblin, one of his many alter egos.
Indeed. Although I do like the justification that they changed it because War Machine didn't test well with audiences or whatever. Like that, I think, is a fun little knock at certain things. And then you have Don Cheadle saying, you know, like War Machine rocks with an X, all caps is his password, and it's like
really appreciated War Machine 68.
Yes.
Like it's almost like he almost did it, but then decided to not because James Rhodes would not do War Machine 69 because
he wouldn't. I also like this idea that, you know, we see kind of what they're doing with War Machine, and it's like what the world would be like if Tony Stark wasn't so ego driven, if they could get him on side, and sort of their response to the Avengers, where the public are seeing just a collection of random individuals succeed where their government wasn't able to do anything, and so they're making War Machine more visible, they're sending him out, he's doing stuff, and I do like this idea that the government on some level don't like the Avengers or S.H.I.E.L.D. and like this is our like superhero. Yeah, Don Cheadle's fun here. When him and Tony are like buddying up near the end, out of their suits, in the house and everything, I think that's all good stuff.
This is a lot more confident Don Cheadle than the last movie. Like in the last one, he's kind of coming into a franchise that's kind of like already up in motion. Whereas, I mean, John Cheadle is good at delivering comedy, and so him coming into a movie which is infinitely more asking for him to be funnier than Iron Man 2 is a big thing. Like he got to do some comedy beats in Iron Man 2, but he was mostly kind of like acted off the screen by Sam Rockwell. But in this one, he's face to face with Tony for a lot of it, and they're out of their suits for a lot of it as well, which really does help kind of like...
And not just both individually talking directly into a camera to simulate inside of their helmet and everything.
Yeah, you get to see chemistry, which he didn't get to do in the last movie, because he's in... Both of them are in their suits for as much as they are in the second movie. They don't actually get to like act together.
And I really like the constant reminders that Rhodey is very physically capable, whereas Tony requires his suits. At the end, when they're at the docks, the shipyard, whatever, and he tells him to shoot out the light. He's like, no one could hit a light from here, and then Rhodey just stands up and does it immediately, and it's like, yeah, cool, good stuff. But I talked about how he is kind of robbed of his supporting cast. Included in that is Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan, doing far more acting. He is injured in an extremis attack, which is what motivates Tony to challenge the Mandarin to a sort of one-on-one, which I think is a very well done scene that is very in keeping with Tony. It's kind of, Tony tries to be a better, more like thoughtful person, but when something extreme happens, he reverts back to who he was in Iron Man 1, where he's very impulsive, and he's always felt very safe, like nothing bad can happen to him. So he doesn't really think through the idea of giving his address out on TV and daring the Mandarin to come get him. So I do like that, but, you know, what we do see of Favreau, I mean, in the present day, he's very neurotic, he's checking badges, he's, you know, Downton Abbey on the TV while he's in hospital. That's all good fun. But my favourite bit with Jon Favreau has got to be the beginning of this film, which is a flashback to 1999, and Jon Favreau has a mullet and a really bad beard, and it is amazing, and it contains something that I think Ben is very excited to talk about in that opening scene.
People watch Iron Man and they expect to get Black Sabbath because they wrote a song called Iron Man.
Yeah.
And then lots of people will kind of like raise up the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack for being one of the best uses of music in films ever. I'm going to say that the song choice to open this movie is the single best music beat in this entire MCU. I do not think there is a better...
Immediately it's 1999.
Yeah, just the over-the-top narration with all the suits blowing up, and then Tony going, I need to take us back to the beginning, and then Blue...
Dabba-dee-dabba-die.
Dabba-dee-dabba-die starts picking up and like, oh, we're going back to the beginning. Like, we're going late 90s.
It fucked me up when I saw this film in the cinema. Like, I hadn't heard that song in years, and then that hits... with the Paramount logo, I think. Yeah,
and then it comes to 1999, and it's just because it's so unexpected. Because you've got 3 movies now of Tony having like these hard rock 70s and 80s music choices, and they all feel very much a piece of like what the Iron Man character is. And then for the 3rd movie in the franchise to go like, you know what, fuck it, we're going to go for some 1990s house music, and you're just like, yes.
And Ho Yinsen is seen there briefly because he did mention in Iron Man 1 that they'd met before, and Tony doesn't remember it because we see it here. We also see Aldrich Killian, Guy Pearce, looking much less attractive, but we'll be talking about him later. It's just a fun little scene where Robert Downey Jr. gets to be dickhead Tony Stark again for a few minutes. He gets to like hit on a lady. We're talking about her as well soon, but yeah, I do like that little scene at the beginning.
Yeah, it's Shane Black's chance to write the Tony Stark that kind of like people grew to know and love in like Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2. He gets to do bits and pieces of it throughout this movie, but like this is the Tony Stark that we got to see in Iron Man 1, and Shane Black just kind of going like, oh, I can't not do it, so I'm just going to do it as a contrast to kind of like show how much growth there has been in these movies, even if it doesn't feel like it, and it just kind of helps that journey kind of along a little bit when you get to this contrast at the start, whereas the end, when the girl from the party in Switzerland shows up, you think that Tony doesn't remember her at first, and then it turns out that he does, and he actually is someone that can remember these kind of things. You get to see that kind of like a slight change in him. He's not 100% good because he gets her job wrong, but yes.
Do you think, you mentioned that a second ago, like the Tony people grew to know and love. Do you think the reason people are wrong about not liking the panic attack stuff is they want to see Tony just be cocky and confident and arrogant and all, and this thing of him being vulnerable they're not into? Like, it's
part of that. I think it's because this movie does so much that kind of you don't expect it to. It's weird that it feels like there's a diversity of opinion, which is Iron Man 2 sucks and Iron Man 3 sucks, and I think they both are the complete opposite ends of each other. Like, Iron Man 2 plays it far too safe. It's very much like this is Iron Man again. And then Iron Man 3 is very much like we've taken the trappings of Iron Man, but we've thrown everything out the window and it's completely different. And there are things that this movie fails at, but I'm much more excited to see something that comes along and goes like, we're going to take some things that work, but we're going to take risks. Yeah. And I think most of the risks in this movie pay off wonderfully. And I think it's the most subversive movie that Marvel have done, like until Guardians of the Galaxy, but even then that's become a trope in and of itself.
Yes.
So even though it's a risk to do it to start with, when the second movie comes out, it's still more of the same.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like these audiences, like people say like, oh, I just want more of that. They gave you more of that in Iron Man 2, but worse, and people don't like that. So they give you something completely different, and then it's like, and you don't like that either. It's like, well, what do you want? I feel a lot of this of the criticism of this movie is people had a very specific vision of what this film was going to be going into it, and then some people don't like to have their expectations not met. They don't like subversion. I love it. I want surprises. I don't want to be able to see a trailer and then go in and know every single thing that happens in the film. I probably shouldn't watch trailers at all, but I have a sickness, so I must. But, this will become more evident as we go. Let's move on. The next criticism is the kid, Ty Simpkins as Harley Keener. He has a 3-picture deal. He is listed in the cast list for Avengers 4, so they're either doing time travel or Tony dies and this kid has to be shown or something. But, right, now, look, if you just hate children in action movies and you feel that the second a kid shows up or a woman has too prominent of a role and it should just be men being tough and fighting, fuck you.
This kid is not bad. He is dropping jokes and they're well delivered.
Yeah.
They're quite complex jokes and stuff like that. He's not bad at all.
No, because there is that thing that all child actors are terrible, which is not true. I can reel off a few that are pretty good, but
Shane Black is one of those guys who's very good at finding child actors, because you watch The Nice Guys and he's got Ty Simpkins returning very briefly, but
good scene though.
It is, but Angry Rice in Nice Guys is absolutely superb. She's better than he is in this one. So Shane Black obviously has a talent for finding child actors that can deliver his dialogue and be quippy with it.
Wise beyond their years.
Yeah. Ty Simpkins, he does things he plays dumb. He shows up and goes, who are you? And then he shows him a newspaper which has Tony Stark's name written on it and stuff like that. And you just kind of
He's just fucking with him.
Yeah, he is just fucking with him. And that little bit at the end where they have the conversation before he gets in the car and and Tony drives away and stuff like that. And he's going I'm cold, and then just his face kind of turns and goes it was worth a shot. That's not acting. That is genuinely well done, moving from one place to another. He's being manipulative, and yes, you can tell, but I think you're supposed to be able to tell.
Also, he's in this film for what, 8-10 minutes maybe?
Yeah, but it's good because you can tell that Downey Jr. likes this kid and he's having fun with him. And
also that plays into everything I've been saying, where we started out with him as a bachelor in his 40s with no close family or friends, and then he spent 2 films worrying about his legacy and his mortality and all of this stuff and his character, and he's annoyed that everyone immediately respects Cap, whereas he in his mind is more worthy of people's respect and he doesn't necessarily get it. And what are comic books even about if it is not about trying to inspire kids? And Tony now has this real opportunity to assess his character and to actually interact with a kid and have a positive impact. And it's not that he just completely does a 180, because he's still kind of a dick. He tells him not to be a pussy because his dad's left and stuff like that, and he denies him. Yeah,
comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. And when he says he's cold, he's I know, because we're connected, and then he just drives off and stuff. And he's not Tony anymore just because he's having a moment with a kid, and he clearly has father issues of his own, and this kid is him. It's a clever young kid whose dad is, Tony's dad was there, but you get this sense he was very cold to him, and it's what more do you want for a piece of character development than something like this, where he gets to see a young version of himself, and then at the end giving him all the gadgets and stuff, and using the stuff he brings him as to help him out and stuff. I think it's great. I like this kid. I see no problem with him whatsoever.
No, I don't. It's not bad. It doesn't intrude on the movie. It's not Tony is impeded by him. The kid actively helps him.
Yeah, he's not doing an escort mission from a video game or anything. This kid
no.
Just he gets out of the way.
It feels like a lot of complaints against child actors are normally it's like in TV shows where the teen actor is angry at the protagonist and stuff like that, or is actively impeding on it. It's the similar problem in cable dramas where the wife of the anti-hero is getting in the way of the main character doing cool things and stuff like that. And I don't think this kid is doing that at all. He's helping him. He's doing things that help Tony. He tells him where to go, who to speak to, gives him important backstory.
And has electromagnets to hand. I've also heard the criticism that including this kid is a blatant attempt to appeal to a younger demographic. It's right, one, they don't need to do that because the young demographic like all these Marvel films anyway. And two, I don't think that's true generally because this film is full of some quite dark, violent, scary, gritty stuff. So it's not like this is Iron Man for kids or anything like that.
Yeah, and also if we want to get into pandering to specific audiences, we can get into the fan bing things.
Yes, well, let's just talk about it now then. As you brought it up, it's more organic. In China, this film had extra people in it and extra scenes. You had Wang Zhekui. Shukwe? I don't know how to pronounce it.
You can say his name, like the character's name.
Oh, okay, Dr. Wu and his assistant, who was played by Fan Bingbing. There's more Chinese dialogue, there are more scenes. They made a very conscious effort to play to the Chinese market because Phase 1, some of these movies, the international box office wasn't taken as seriously. I feel from Avengers going forward, it's been a huge deal.
It's a big shift that's happened in the cinema market where, like, China only gets a couple of movies from the West allowed every single year.
I think 10 they're allowed for a whole year.
And, like, they do quite often pick Marvel movies, and so this was part of that early ongoing thing where, like, Disney were trying to actually actively give Chinese cinema goers a reason to come see this movie. And you see other movies kind of make more, like The Great Wall is very much like it's a movie made in China that they hired Matt Damon to kind of star in because Western stars give it an air of legitimacy that Chinese stars don't. For some reason, I'm intrigued to see how stuff like how is Black Panther going to play in Asia, because the domestic market is so huge now where like movies are routinely making 60% of their gross in overseas markets compared to back like when Iron Man 1 came out, 54% of that money came from just domestic total, but now we're in the Avengers and 70% of the overseas of the budget for Age of Ultron was from overseas markets.
Yeah.
So there's this huge shift in like where the money's coming from. We'll see where a movie that plays to a not Asian market like Black Panther is kind of going to land on that. Do a tangent and hint at things coming in the future that we don't even know is going to happen.
We'll find out in like 9 episodes or something like that. Right, next, the thing that I think you and I are most excited to talk about, the Mandarin twist.
I had this spoiled for me.
Did you? Oh, that sucks. I was so... Oh my god, I cannot communicate how fun it was to be in the cinema when this is revealed. So, the Mandarin historically is a massive Asian, like, offensive stereotype, like a Fu Manchu, like, wise, mystical man with 10 rings, and, like, you can't do that these days. Like, I don't know how often the Mandarin shows up in comics. I think in terms of ones that have come out since 2000, I've read like maybe 2 that have him in, and one of them was like a big one-shot or something. You know, they've tried to move away from, like, I feel, characters like this. And people were calling for the Mandarin in the first 2 films, I think just because they're misguided. I don't know, like they just want the thing they saw when they were young or whatever. But they've always said it's hard to do, and they finally said, okay, we're going to do it. Ben Kingsley is playing the Mandarin. All the trailers and all the scenes with him in the first sort of half of the movie, he is playing this very clearly terrorist-style character who is co-opting a lot of iconography from the like Osama bin Laden like cave videos and stuff like that. And he talks about how he wanted to find an accent that would be unsettling to a Western audience, where it's got a hint of Southern, it's got a hint of like Native American, and it's multicultural and all these things. And then we get this reveal when Tony finally tracks him down, that he is a British actor called Trevor Slattery, who is a bumbling idiot who has been hired to play this role by Aldrich Killian, who will be our next point to talk about. And he just sits in this house, this big mansion, being supplied with prostitutes and drugs, and he just makes these fake videos where he's the Mandarin. And I think it's absolutely fucking genius, and probably if not for the consequence of the PTSD and them going for something emotionally nuanced in a superhero movie, I would say this is the best thing in this movie. It
takes a level of intelligence to look at something from that was made in the 1960s and is an ingrained part of a character, then go, this is maybe not the best thing to base our movie around. Then to kind of like analyse where we're at in terms of popular culture and go, what's the best way to deploy this in such a way that it feels like a real and present danger, but also not be massively, massively offensive to everyone. And just like the amount of hoops that they would have had to have gone through and stuff like that. And people were expecting this to be Marvel's Joker.
Yes, I feel that's a huge part of this, in that we've had The Dark Knight in vaguely recent history, I guess 2 years ago. People are fucking obsessed with Heath Ledger's Joker, like to an unhealthy degree, in my opinion. I feel that character has had as much of a negative impact on film and comic book fandom as positive, but that's another discussion. And all the trailers are playing him as this very sinister, well-acted terrorist. Like, you'll never see me coming. Like, all this stuff. And I think they wanted that Joker. They wanted a Marvel Joker. And instead it's like, surprise. Hello, I'm Trevor Slattery. And it's like, fuck it. Like, they're playing you. Like, they are co-opting all this imagery. They're using this obsession with Joker to help build a thing, and then surprise!
They even do the whole like telling multiple versions of stories or telling the same story like multiple times in like his backstory and stuff like that. Like when he starts delivering the Chinese cookies speech again, but as Trevor, it's just like, what is going on here? Like, why is he repeating this to these prostitutes? Like,
and Robert Downey Jr. plays it all so well as well, because he looks so genuinely confused. He can't take it in. Like, we know immediately. We're like, oh, okay. And he's like, what? Like, fucking what? Like, he immediately is like, where's the real guy? And he's like, there isn't. I made him up. Like, it's all movie magic love and all. It's like, oh my god, so good.
It just plays into that, like, you can tell, like, this is the kind of thing that some big business person in America would probably think up to try and drive up business.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel out of the realms of possibility. Like, do you think terrorism is worse, or do you think the kind of American corporations kind of like playing in your personal feelings and stuff like that is a bigger deal? And the movie kind of like, it explores both kind of angles at that.
What if one used the other to further its original?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, we get a little bit of that in Iron Man 1, where the weapons company is funding terrorists and the good guys at the same time and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this is like
war is a profitable business. Like that is a thing you'll see in many mediums.
Yeah, but this is like a step above that, because it takes you down this road and then slaps you in the face and pushes you down a hill.
I don't know if it was Shane Black or Drew Pearce or both, but one of them said, why would you ever admit to being an international terrorist? Why would you appear on camera and say, hi, I'm behind all this stuff? And it's like, yes, you're completely correct. Why would you do that? So Killian inventing this character for everyone to lose their minds about and look for when they never will find him, it's genius. I love it. And like you said, it speaks to the intelligence of the guy that created him, because, you know, he's looking at what makes people shit their pants these days, and it's this, and just to bring all of that in and prey on those fears, I think is great. I think it's this might be the most sensible piece of change to sort of source material in comic book movie history.
Yes, I don't think there's a better analysis of like what works in the 60s and what doesn't work in the 60s, and then deciding to chuck out the stuff that doesn't work but still do it. There are things that still work from nowadays, from then and stuff like that, but like you can see there are little bits and pieces that are just problematic to adapt. Something like Luke Cage is problematic.
Yes, and Iron Fist as well, you know.
Yeah.
You've got blaxploitation, you've got, you know, the white man kung fu movement, you know. These were all the rage when those characters were created, and you've got to find ways to do those with more subtlety. I don't know if people don't like this because they felt tricked and they felt embarrassed that they got tricked. I don't know if they misguidedly think, but you ruined the Mandarin, this character I don't actually give a shit about, but I've decided I do, because no one gives a shit about the Mandarin.
I think there are people that think they do, though. I think the problem with this is twofold, is that they think the Mandarin is some untouchable character that cannot be like messed with and stuff like that. But then you look at how the Joker's been adapted in so many different ways by so many different people, and most of the time it works. Like, there are lots of different interpretations that you can do of some of the best characters in the medium, and this is just another flavour of the Mandarin that works. Yeah. But the other thing is, something that's been levelled against another big Disney movie recently, is that people don't like things that make light of the stuff that they take very seriously.
Yeah, this article claimed that it's offensive to use all of this real-world terrorist-style imagery as part of a giant joke. And it's like, I don't know if it's so much haha terrorism as just a sensible sort of character beat to there is an argument to be made there, like, if you find that offensive, I guess you find that offensive, but I think it's great. I think it's a really cunning little bit of writing that tricks everyone, and then inject that levity with this character of Trevor, and, like, you know, make everyone feel a bit like, oh, like, I think that's good.
Yeah, it's like, the movie I'm comparing it to is like Star Wars The Last Jedi, which uses humour very implicitly across this, or like explicitly across its movie and stuff like that, and I feel like a lot of complaints come from people who can't quite grapple with the way the humour is used.
I just also feel there's an element of, they want their superhero films to just be badasses, like grizzly men, like just everything's cool and everyone's overcoming everything, and the only humour that's welcome is like sarcasm and the villain being made to look a bit stupid because of the hero. And I think some people, as soon as there's something a bit silly, a bit lighthearted injected, they're like, oh, this is for kids. And it's like, dude, like, you need to assess what you're a fan of. Look at comic books. They are fucking silly as heck. There are so many that have people wearing their underwear outside their clothing. Like, come on. This reminds me of David Goyer, who just constantly seems like he's embarrassed of superheroes and is trying to cool them up. And it's like, no, don't. Just embrace what it is. And if you don't like that, you don't like it. But let's not deny the foundations of this medium.
Yeah, we are coming into an era now where Marvel are actively having to fight back against the dark knighting of this genre. Avengers was obviously a big success, and then you can still see little bits of it kind of creeping into their movies. Like, this movie gets to fight against it, but then Thor: The Dark World coming up next is very much, you can tell that they went like, oh, let's do this a little bit darker, and it just doesn't quite work as much. And these Marvel movies, they can do dark. There are movies in this franchise that do dark very well, but these movies from now on pretty much understand that they do big, bright, colourful very well.
Yeah.
And there are more movies going down the line that are going to become more explicitly comedic, and I think they're going to be better received. Yeah. So I think Iron Man 3 is almost a Trojan horse in that it kind of had to come out and kind of be like, we're going to be going this angle. We're not going to be just doing quips during the final battle going forward. We're going to be doing actual comedy.
Yeah. And why not? Like, who doesn't like to laugh? Who doesn't like fun? Like, all right. You know, obviously this was so like poorly received, unfortunately, that Shane Black said that they made the one-shot All Hail the King as a direct sort of way to fix what he came up with. And, you know, we haven't been talking about these one-shots, but I feel this is the only one that, like, directly applies. In that, we see Trevor in prison with Sam Rockwell, yay, and the real Mandarin is angry that he used his name, and it's like, ugh. I'm glad this is a one-shot that we can all just ignore. I've seen people on the internet say, I'm glad the Mandarin's coming, like, in a future movie. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. Like, sorry, but that's done. You will never hear about the Mandarin again.
Yeah, like, they're not going to do an Iron Man 4. The Mandarin's not going to show up. He's not going to show up in a post-credit scene in Avengers 3 and be, like, shaking his fist or whatever it is. This was basically just done to pander to you, you small petty person.
Yes, but we got to see more Trevor and we got to see more Sam Rockwell, so I'm torn about that one shot. So part of why people don't like it is that, you know, the main villain, Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce, is lame. And I've also, you know, he is full of extremis, so his body has been repaired, but he, you know, is able to generate extreme heat and stuff like that, and at one point he breathes fire. If you are not down with him breathing fire, fine. That might be too comic booky for some people. I do like Don Cheadle's immediate response to him breathing fire, of just immediately like, oh, you breathe fire? Okay, yeah, and just stands down from his fight, like, instantly. But just in general, so our villains here, now that we are revealed that the Mandarin is not the villain, we've got Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian, who is, you know, a rival would-be Tony Stark. He's the head of AIM. He is revealed to be the mastermind. We've got Rebecca Hall as Maya Hansen, who is... She came up with the extremis thing in the first place, kind of, and, you know, she's revealed to have been working with Aldrich when we at first thought she was nice. We've got Stephanie Shostak as Brant and James Badge Dale as Savin. They are, you know, just some creepy extremis henchmen. And, you know, this little foursome of villains people don't really like. And, I don't know, I feel they have a bit of a point in some ways, but this is a more complicated issue. So Guy Pearce, you know, Jude Law was considered for this part. I could see him playing it. I could see Jude Law as a smarmy, like, you know, it's a different type of character to Justin Hammer because he's not openly trying to mimic Tony, but he is another sort of business magnate who has got sinister stuff going on. I don't think it's a bad performance. I just don't think it's a particularly good one.
I think they split too much time across all four of these villains that none of them really get a lot to do or a lot of building up. Like, they do a lot of shorthand with Aldrich Killian, like, because it's like, oh, look, he's attractive now, and like that change in makeup does a lot of work into kind of like setting up what his character arc's going to be. But like, they don't actually spend much time with him. Like, he's not the one that's tracking down Tony. That's the two henchmen and stuff like that. And then like each one of them, they kind of like take them down at kind of like a key point in the movie, so they're not there to go forward. But it just never, because they're doing too much work with Tony, and because there's four of them, they just can't give any one of them focus, even though all four of them are good and all four of them have the right screen presence for what the roles want to do. There's just a bit much.
And the biggest thing with this is that And Shane Black's original script, Rebecca Hall as Maya Hansen, is revealed as the big bad. Killian did not exist in this script. Aldrich Killian is a very minor character in the comic, and I think he dies immediately, and that's what starts the Extremis investigation. And Rebecca Hall has famously said she did not enjoy making this film. She didn't sign up for what she ended up playing, and I can understand why she'd be pissed, because they wrote her as the one that was manipulating everyone. And then the people from Marvel's sort of higher ownership, so you can interpret that to be the same guy that publicly has been labelled as a sexist, as saying Black Widow toys don't sell, so we're not making any Black Widow merch, girls don't buy toys, etc. Ike Perlmutter is the guy I'm talking about. But
they're also the same group of people that said that the 70s music in Guardians of the Galaxy would be a bad idea because it wouldn't appeal to kids.
There you go. That worked out well. The word came from up on high. Shane Black has relentlessly said Kevin Feige is cool, not him at all, love that dude. The news came from up on high. They don't want a female villain in this movie because girls don't buy toys. We need a male villain. We need male action figures. So as a result, they basically cut the legs out from under Maya. Stephanie Shostak was going to be the lone sort of extremis henchman. James Badge Dale was then inserted. I think he's decent, but it makes her seem worse by comparison, Stephanie Shostak's character. And it was going to be, I like this idea that this smart woman and this extremis woman were the ones pulling the strings with this Mandarin character. Two women tricking all the men. I think that would have been great, personally. But what we end up with is Maya starts out as just someone that, has a one-night stand with Tony in Switzerland in 1999, and then she comes back. He seems to not remember who she is. She helps Pepper escape. They have an okay scene together in the car. She is very quickly revealed to be working for Killian, and then Tony is quite mean to her. I think some of the writing wasn't that nice there, because Mike and I discussed how Shane Black does have a couple of issues with writing women, which I think he's improved on over time. Or how men talk about women, I think, more accurately. And then she, regrets what she's doing, and then Killian kills her in probably maybe his best scene. When he kills her.
It's weird because it completely throws her under the bus, because she's doing this big moment of like, I'm going to sacrifice myself to save Tony's life, and then Killian's just like, fuck it.
Yeah. I like Rebecca Hall. I don't know why. I can't really think of anything that she's like amazing in, but I kind of want her to succeed. There's certain actors and actresses I don't want them to do well. She's one of them. And I would have really, 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 really liked it if she had gotten to play the character she signed up for. And I think if this movie had been made 1 and maybe 2 years later, we might have got something more, something closer to what Shane Black originally wrote. But instead, this Aldrich Killian character is there. He's not phenomenal, but there's so many other people distracting from him, he never really gets a chance to be truly memorable. Maya is like half a character. Stephanie Shostak barely talks. And then you got James Badge Dale, who I think is kind of cool. Like, in his first scene, he's just sort of like lazily laying in this chair, like being a cocky prick and just over time. He's just got a weird sort of physicality about him that makes
I've got a lot of ingrained love for James Badge Dale because he was in both The Pacific and Rubicon in 2010, and I was kind of excited to see him do more stuff after he was in both of those. And he's very much not this character. He's very kind of like the straight edge, kind of like straight man almost role in those. And in this one, he's shaved head,
just a greasy fuck.
Yeah, and it's like it was really good to see him, and I almost didn't recognize him at first, but I think he's the one that comes off best, because I think he's of henchmen that you get in these movies.
Yeah.
I think this is the one that I think of the most.
He's got just enough charisma to not steal focus, but still not seem like just a candy ass who's going to get like swept aside immediately.
Yeah, like he is like there's a henchman role in Thor: Dark World that we'll be discussing next week that is such a waste of a talented actor. It's insane. Whereas this is not that at all. Like I think like everyone gets to do a little bit, and they come off like physically they all look the role, but they are just not characters at all. They're just four quarters that make this into an almost functioning villain, but not quite.
Yeah, I think he of them comes off the best. Like he does a lot with he's got very little lines, but it's memorable, I think.
And he gets a hole blown into him at the end.
He does.
He's not quite as good as being kicked into a tree, but it is still...
Well, that's immortal. Some people don't like this sort of more supernatural, fire-breathing, exploding, magical powers enhanced thing in their Iron Man, or their Iron Man. He literally just was fighting aliens alongside a god. If you want him to just go off to a corner and have there be no non-realistic stuff happening, I think that's quite a misguided thing to try and do. And I'll say, I'd rather this than another film where he's fighting another Iron Man knockoff.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if it was toned down a little bit, like if it was just like they were trying to develop a super soldier kind of replacement and stuff like that, and so it was more in line with that. But I don't mind them kind of like boosting, because I do think like the heat element adds some interesting parts where it's just like they keep on getting them out of the suits. Like there is anytime they're fighting one of them, they're just like, I'm just going to heat this thing up and get you out of it. Because
and they're also superhumanly strong, so they're able to smash some of those suits towards the end. We'll talk about that scene. The next criticism is that the Vice President is in on it, which is a very 90s thing. Of all of these criticisms, that's the only one where I might go, yeah, fair enough. Miguel Ferrer is playing Vice President Rodriguez. His daughter, I think she's had an amputated leg or something, so you can see how he might have been promised extremis to fix her, and also he will become president if they kill the president, and it's part of Killian's whole manipulate everyone plan. It's a tiny, tiny little beat, and it didn't bother me, but I guess...
Yeah, it's fine. It doesn't impact it either way. Like, it feels oddly optimistic in today's day and age of politics involving US presidents. But yeah, like I don't like. It's weird that this is the only Marvel movie that kind of like has explicitly the president.
Yeah, like President Ellis, named after Warren Ellis, of course.
Yeah, he shows up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. down the line as well.
Really? Oh,
he does. So it's just weird that we've had shady governments and stuff like that, and then to have the president in this movie, it kind of feels like, okay, I get that you're leveling it up, but like in a world where there are aliens, like I don't need a president. I like the kind of like self-containedness of these other movies that don't bring us into real world politics. Like we've had senators and stuff like that, but
it'd make way more sense for the president to appear in a Captain America movie. But hey ho.
Yeah.
So the next one is the aftermath of the plane scene. Now this is a criticism that wasn't a common one, but it was on this list. So we get this scene where James Badge has stolen the Iron Patriot armor. He gets on Air Force One because the president thinks he's Rhodey, and then in midair he hijacks the plane and he puts the president in the Iron Patriot armor, which has been programmed to fly him back to their base or whatever. And Tony boards the plane, and James Badge sets off an explosive before he is killed. And all these hostages are falling off this plane, and Tony has to race and grab them all. He can only carry 4, so he has to creatively come up with a solution wherein he gets them all to sort of hold hands and they play tumbling monkeys. I like the scene. The guy who wrote this criticism liked the scene. It's a fun, creative little thing to do, high stakes, all that. The criticism comes in what happens afterwards, and it's that Tony recovers on a bridge or something, and then a truck hits him, and the suit of armour falls apart, revealing Tony wasn't in it, and he is remotely controlling it, like we saw him do at the beginning of the film with Pepper. And the criticism is that by having Tony remotely pilot the suit, it means there are no stakes, and that being Iron Man is no more difficult than playing a video game. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Of course it is, for one thing. For another, it adds to that subversion that we keep talking about, where you don't expect to see the hero get hit by a truck and then, the hero wasn't there at all. So I'm on board with that.
It's a good moment of levity, like before you head into the final climactic fight scene. It's just like it breaks it up a little bit, and it kind of gives you a moment to breathe because you realise that we're not heading straight into like the big explosion fest that's going to win the movie. And it's not like it's come out of the blue.
Yeah, they laid the groundwork by having him do it to Pepper earlier.
He has done this before. It's not like other people haven't just got in the suits. Like we're now at how many people have just got into the Iron Man suit? Rhodey, Pepper, James Badge character, or
the president.
The president is in it now. He doesn't get to use it, but he still just gets to fly away with it. You have Mickey Rourke's character for Iron Man 2 just builds one. Ironmonger in Iron Man 1 just builds a suit. Like these suits aren't uncontrollable and unubiquitously controllable. This basically just says like Tony has made a new thing that makes it safer.
And that makes sense. If he's like scared now after what happened, obviously at times he has to pilot it, but if he can do things without physically being president, why the fuck wouldn't being present, why the fuck wouldn't he?
And it also like lays the groundwork for like future developments of what this tech is going to do in movies coming up down the line. So there is, I mean, I get it's that kind of thing where it feels like if you make the hero too powerful, then you kind of like take away your tension and stuff like that. And it's just like, no, because he's not going to not show up. If you were sat there in that final action scene going, oh god, is Tony actually here? Then you're an idiot. Like, he actually puts himself in danger there.
These two link together because in this final action scene, with the president hanging there ready to be lit on fire, Tony is running around with Rhodey, and he calls in all of his suits, and there are just suits flying everywhere, remotely controlled by Jarvis, fighting extremist dudes. We've got suits blowing up, and we've got Tony jumping from one suit to another, and it's kind of fun, but it is also like way too big, I think. But the criticism comes here in that Tony is a superhero outside of the suit. And the criticism is that, what made Iron Man 1 good is that he's a normal guy, but when he puts on this suit, he's like an invincible fighter jet. That's not what made Iron Man 1 cool, and it's also a massive misunderstanding of what this character is. As you said, loads of people have put this suit on. They're not all Iron Man, because Tony is the superhero. He has a almost superhuman level of intelligence, and at one point it is literally a superhuman level of intelligence in the comics, but I don't like that. But anyway, and we've seen this character growing over time, and especially in Avengers, where he's like, what are you without the suit? And then this whole movie answers that question. Turns out he has become a heroic individual who is incredibly intelligent and is gradually becoming, through use of the suit and being in more and more dangerous situations, he's becoming a more physically capable person. And maybe it is a bit much to see all of these suits, which are supposed to be kind of invincible, just constantly breaking and being blown up and torn apart. But for one thing, these people have superpowers, and for another, maybe not all the suits are designed to be as strong as each other. I don't know. But while this scene, I think, feels a bit, over the top in some ways, I do think it's a lot of fun. And like the more specific criticism of Tony as a superhero without the suit, that's so dumb, because that would make it so that anyone could be Iron Man, and it's just like playing a video game. But no, this is Tony Stark. He is a heroic character.
Yeah, like the 2 points in the article make it seem like, oh no, look, Tony, anyone can fly the suit, but also Tony's a superhero outside of the suit. It's just like,
it's an immediate contradiction.
Yeah, like you don't, like, clearly no one else can wear the suit because he is the explicit hero. See, I'm of two minds on this Act 3.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we might as well talk about that here.
We might as well talk about it. That's why I was phrasing it as Act 3. Yeah, it's weird in that I like everything it does. I just don't feel like it feels like a satisfying conclusion to this movie.
Yeah.
It
felt like they just threw 50 million at the screen and wanted a huge high action, high concept set piece.
I feel like there are ways that they could have probably done it and made it feel of a piece, but it's just one of those weird moments where it's just like I'm watching this and going like, I like what's happening, but I also feel like you're not actually concluding the movie that I was excited to be watching 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, and it's full of like cutesy little moments. Like I really like the idea of him attaching his suit to Killian and then blowing it up, because he can't fight him normally because he's almost invincible, but by using this tech we've seen him do and put the suit around him and then blow it up, that's a cool idea. And waiting for the Mark 42 to show up and then it immediately hits a railing and bursts into pieces and then he just goes whatever. Like, that's all fun, and we get to see Pepper like all extremist up and doing what she does. I don't know, they just think they took it a little bit too far there.
How do you feel? So in this final act, Pepper is in breathless danger for most of it, and then eventually she falls into fire. How do you feel about that fake out? Because obviously Pepper does not die. No. Pepper comes back to kill the villain at the end, but for a good 5 minutes of the movie,
she's dead.
She's dead, in quotation marks.
And we're seeing what Tony would do if she did die. I don't know. It would have been very bold. I wouldn't have enjoyed it if they'd stuck to it, I don't think. But certainly quite a like, oh shit moment. But I think I just knowing she had Extremis in her, you probably could have.
Yeah, it's done in such a weird way where like when it happens in about 2 seconds. She's there, she falls into the fire, and then they're moving on to the next beat. I'm just like, okay, like in a movie, like there's no 10 seconds of them trying to like grab hands and them just missing her. It's just she falls, you get Tony's reaction shot, she's in the fire, and it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no like the music cuts out and like, oh my god.
Yeah, like they didn't make a big deal of it, so you just can't. So it just adds to that fact that she's not dead, and it's just like, why are we doing this beat if you're not gonna trick me to subvert it later? Why are you even bothering to do this? Is like it's just that weird moment in that scene where it's just like, I want to believe this, but I know based on all the knowledge of cinematic language that I've accumulated over my life that you are not doing this. So why are you bothering?
Indeed. And then following on from this, once they've won the fight, Tony destroys all of his suits, or that we know. And he finally has surgery to have the shrapnel removed from his chest. He fixes Pepper, all this stuff. He throws an arc reactor into the ocean, and then he drives away from his destroyed house, and he says, "I am Iron Man." And I think it is a bit glossed over that he just fixes Pepper, and it did raise the question of if he could have had the shrapnel taken out, why didn't he until now?
Do we want to talk about this now, or do we want to talk about in Age of Ultron?
Part of it we can talk about now, I think.
Okay.
Shane Black originally wrote this as, "Who am I? I'm Tony Stark." And they dropped that, and I think that would have been great, because you start with him saying, "I am Iron Man," and then he learns that the armour isn't what makes him a superhero and a valuable person who can make positive change. That's a tool Tony Stark uses, and I think that would have been great. It's just not quite as catchy as "I am Iron Man."
Yeah, and it would also make it a really nice piece of the first movie, because
Yes.
that one ends with him saying, "I am Iron Man," and this one ends with, "I am Tony Stark," and that one implies a lot bigger journey that he's gone on.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred that too. This is one of those big offenders where this ending is really good for a self-contained trilogy just involving this one character. This feels like the end of Tony Stark's storyline. The thing is, we know there are at least, at this point, there are 3 movies that have come out featuring this character that kind of have to ignore this ending. Because this is the ending you do if, this is your Dark Knight Rises ending. This is the one where, he's got the shrapnel taken out, he doesn't need the arc reactor anymore, his house is gone, but he's still, going to be doing other stuff. This is how you end a trilogy. This is not how you posit your character in the run-up to the sequel to one of the biggest movies of all time.
Well, I think he said at the time this would be it for Iron Man films.
I think
they were written into a... Well, I've heard rumour that he's entertaining the idea of doing a 4th one again now, but I know some people at the time, myself included, interpreted this as he was going to do the bleeding edge armor, where it's always inside of him and he just summons it kind of thing, which is probably a little bit too high concept to do in a movie like this. But I do know this did confuse a lot of people. It's but we know Avengers 2 is coming out in 2 years, so what's happening here? It's a difficult little ending, I would say.
It works, and I think in any other superhero franchise it would have been great, but in this living and breathing mechanism that is the MCU, it's just kind of weird.
Well, they will initially stumble over this and then kind of find a way to justify it a little bit, and we'll talk about that as we go. But this article ends with saying they did enjoy the post-credits scene, which I did as well, where it's revealed, because this film is narrated by Tony at the beginning, and it's revealed that this is because he is actually not narrating, but he is telling this story to Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner for a therapy session, and Banner has been sleeping through almost all of it, and he says, "I'm not really that kind of doctor." And it's just a fun little thing, because people were so enthusiastic about their friendship in Avengers, and I think this might have even been Robert Downey Jr.'s idea to bring Ruffalo in for this quick scene. I think it's fun. It's notably the first one of these post-credit scenes that Marvel have done where it doesn't set up another film. I think in one draft he was going to go to space and meet the Guardians of the Galaxy, because they had that on the radar. And Tony obviously is briefly a member of the Guardians in the comics, but I think they changed it because Robert Downey Jr. said he may not want to do anything other than Avengers films going forward. I'm glad that they didn't do that, because that would have been quite an extreme thing to do. It's a fun little scene. Expectations are built so high with these post-credit scenes, and we've heard these rumours that Marvel kind of want us to get away from doing them, and we start to see ones that are more just funny now.
Yeah, you see it in Avengers with the trauma scene at the end, where the mid-credit scene is the one you have to stay to get the setup for what's going to come next, and the post-credit scene is the one that you sit through for a nice little kind of comedy moment involving these characters. You get that in Thor: Dark World, and there are other movies that don't follow through on this, but it does feel like this becomes the trend going forwards, that the post-credit scene is not something you need to have seen. It's just a fun little moment that probably took 2 minutes to film.
Yeah, totally. So, just a few miscellaneous things before we get to our last couple of bits. Adam Pally is Gary the cameraman. Happy Endings was a wonderful show that got done dirty, and I want him to succeed. I think it's fun seeing him as a Tony Stark obsessive who's trying to pattern his look after him. That's a lot of fun. We got cameos from, as I said, Sean Taub as Yinsen, Paul Bettany as Jarvis again. Fun little moment where they've put stockings out in the Stark household for Pepper and Tony, and Jarvis's stocking is in the colours of Vision, and I assume they knew where they were going with Jarvis becoming Vision. Spoilers for a future episode. But if they didn't, that's a wonderful coincidence. Bill Maher, Joan Rivers, various newsreaders are playing themselves. I like when they do that in these kinds of films. It makes them seem a lot more real. And Stan Lee is a beauty pageant judge in another of his cameos, which has become more problematic now, thanks to Real World Revelation.
I was going to say, Bill Maher is also problematic given Real World.
I feel on some level he's always been problematic. But anyway,
this is true.
I think a lot of the stuff with the modular suit, where it's flying onto them, I think it's a little bit goofily shot and a little bit over pantomimed by both Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow at times, like where it's flying onto them bit by bit. I think occasionally it's a little bit overdone, but generally I think the Iron Man suits look really, really good now, and they look how they did in my mind always. But from watching Iron Man 1 and a bit of Iron Man 2, I was like, oh, I guess they haven't always looked amazing. But yeah, I
also just want to say, like, the action piece with Tony with a gun with one finger and one glove is probably my favourite like action beat in this entire franchise or series.
I really like him, doing his Home Alone homemade like invasion kit that he does. Breaking into the mansion.
Just that entire thing in the mansion is really, really good. It's just good fun, and I like the beat that ends that scene where like the guy just says like, I don't even care, I'm just gonna
these guys are so weird, I don't even like them, I'm just gonna go. Yeah, right. So we talked about the the quality of the third act. This is one of those offenders where they build some good stuff for 2 acts and then it takes a downward turn, I would say.
But it doesn't harm the movie. Like, this is like of the movies we've seen so far, this is my second favourite.
Yeah,
like,
definitely Avengers than this.
Yeah, like that. This is like where I put it is like.
Well, it's somewhat similar to Captain America for me, where like the third act is obviously not as good as what has come before it, but there's so much good stuff that came before it that it's not like completely derailing to me.
The thing is, I put this at a whole level above Captain America.
Yes.
I think like Captain America does a lot of stuff really well, but I feel like this movie has a personality that Captain America doesn't quite nail.
Absolutely.
If I'm doing like the top tier Marvel movies, this is still in my like top 5 to this day.
I can't off the top of my head tell you where I would put it, but I like it a lot as well.
So Act 3, it just doesn't hurt it. Like, it's a bad Act 3 in the context of the movie, but it doesn't make the movie worse. So it's going to be the same for a few movies that I would say are like some of the best of the MCU, where their Act 3 doesn't impact the overall quality of the movie, but you do have to say that it's not good. Like, it doesn't end well. No. Like, the stuff you will think back on this movie is going to be in Act 1 and Act 2, and then Act 3 is just kind of, it's there.
Yeah. So Villain Watch, you can kind of get our feelings from this from what we've talked about. It's sort of a villain by committee in some ways. So if you're talking about the villain as Aldrich Killian, people are like, ugh. And when people talk about the Mandarin, some of them are like, oh, it's not even a villain. I think between everyone, they almost, as you said, come up with a good villain, but it's not going to be your memorable. It's not Loki, it's not Justin Hammer, it's not some of the better superhero villains. But I feel that the threat, sort of the overall, like, these are the antagonists as a collective, I think it's decent.
Yeah, this works better than both the villains of Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2, but I still wouldn't say they're good villains. Like, it's that weird thing where it's just like, this is the best functioning villain the Iron Man series has had so far, but they just haven't quite nailed having that someone who actually feels like they're someone who could go toe-to-toe with Tony Stark and be interesting whilst doing it. Justin Hammer's the only one that feels like I would want to see the two of them go toe-to-toe, but not in the way that the movie wants them to. I don't want them in suits, I just want that battle of the minds, and I don't feel like this movie nails that, of having like people who feel like an equal to Tony in more ways than just physical strength.
Yeah. So, outstanding performance. So
Ben Kingsley.
Yes. Fair enough. Yeah, done. He gets to have it both ways. He gets to play a huge, melodramatic, genuinely sinister, at times genuinely quite scary, intriguing villain. And he also gets to play a completely bumbling comedy moron. And he gets to do 2 different accents, and it's just great. Like,
yeah.
Regardless of how you feel about the reveal and the implications of that, just his acting as Trevor in a vacuum is great. his delivery of his own name, his sort of bumbling way of talking. He looks really small, and so like he makes himself look little. It's interesting. It's so good. He's 100% getting it for this.
And that's not to say like Tony is great. Like Robert Downey Jr. doesn't do bad work of showing PTSD. I think this is the best that Paul Bettany has got to be so far in what little he's got to do. Like I think Don Cheadle is infinitely confident in the role. I think Ty Simpkins is really good. I think even like Gwyneth Paltrow, who when she gets to do stuff is doing stuff really, really well. But when I think of this movie, I think of Ben Kingsley. Like I think of Ben Kingsley more than I think of any other person in this movie. And it's always like that reveal and the scene in the house. And yes, the scene where he shoots a attorney in the head is tense, but like the two standout moments are just those two individual moments where you get Robert Downey Jr. and Don Cheadle just reacting to this buffoon.
Yeah.
Like I was texting you last night in the middle of the movie where after Don Cheadle shoots, or after Roddy shoots the gun, he then goes up to him and then just touches against his ear, because Shane Black is the kind of director that would think, oh, guns are still hot after you shoot them. Why don't you just do that to kind of punish him?
It reminded me, it's not the same, but it reminded me of in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang when they turned the gun on the guy that had them at gunpoint. Robert Downey Jr. just immediately pistol whips the dude and goes, oh, doesn't that suck? I hit you for no reason. And it's not the same, but it just evoked that to me in a way. I don't know. He is a guy with a lot of attention to detail and sort of little real world things that movies often like to pretend don't happen, and I think he's very good at injecting that level of realism, for better and worse, like the negative aspects of realism where like people fuck up and do things like wrong. I think he's very good at that. And yeah, just like I said, he plays two characters in this movie, so he's doing twice as much as anyone else, so he is legendary. He is all Marvel for me.
I do find it funny that so far our picks from Iron Man have been Downey Jr., Sam Rockwell, and Ben Kingsley.
Well, yeah.
who are functionally playing very similar roles in both Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3. I think Iron Man 2 is more explicitly comedic up front, but I do think that like they're very much playing the same position within Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3. Yeah. And I think it's a very good thing to have in an Iron Man movie, and I just wish that there was more time for them and less time for the kind of boring villain who wants to punch Tony in the face, and more time for the person who hasn't fully thought through their evil machinations.
So there you go. You've had over an hour of us saying that Iron Man 3 is a very good film, and you're probably just sat there for most of it going, no, Mandarin and kids, and fuck you, don't listen to our podcast anymore. No, do though, because next time we will be talking about Thor the Dark World, and we need all the audience we can get for that, because that's not an exciting movie. Spoilers for what we're going to be talking about. No matter what's good and what's bad, it's just not something you can really get enthusiastic about either way. So
can I just not watch it?
You can not watch it if you want. I'm going to watch it and then talk about it. I'm
like,
practicing how to say certain actors' names and stuff, so that's, I don't embarrass myself. So next time it will be Thor the Dark World. Go to entertherealworld.com. That's REEL world.com. Lots of fun stuff. From Broadcast Depth is our Lost podcast. Mike and I will have finished the first winners long before you hear this, talking about Blade. There's probably going to be a few isolated podcasts here and there from me and Mike. We've decided we're not going to do a proper ongoing thing until Ben and I have wrapped this, because I don't have the time for all of that. So who cares? This is what I wanted to do for a long time, and we're doing it.
Depriving people of the content they subscribe to the Real World for. I feel bad now.
I don't know. I think From Broadcast Depth is doing better than anything Mike and I have ever done, so that's good. But yeah, go to everywhere. Go to Mike and Matt on SoundCloud. Subscribe, comment. We will comment back if you want to comment on any of this stuff. We used to do that quite a lot, and then we just stopped. So maybe that's why we're not popular anymore. I don't know. But next time, speaking of not popular, Thor the Dark World. And then we get to talk about Winter Soldier. Yay!